Hey y'all, welcome to Ouachita Parish History with Dara. I'm so glad you've joined me. Today, we are going to be looking at one of the premier historical references for the Ouachita Parish history. And it is written by E. Russ Williams Jr. He is brilliant, has done mega research on our area, and he wrote a book called Filhiol and the Founding of the Spanish Post de Ouachita. And we are going to be reading excerpts from his book today, and we will be looking at pictures from all over our area. But this particular video is going to be based off of, it's going to be talking about the political origins of the Ouachita Post, and also we'll be talking about Don Juan Filhiol because he's so important to just even the reason that Monroe was even successful in this area. So we will start off with the political origins of the Ouachita Post. Prior to the time of Spanish recognition of the Ouachita River Valley as an organized post, the area had witnessed activity by European and Canadian trappers and gaboteurs, which would be like peddlers, for at least a half a century. These adventurers capitalized on the products. They would sell animal pelts and they would sell bear oil. And they would capitalize on the products of the game in abundance there. Few men gained much materially from their efforts, and only a small number remained long enough to leave a written notation. So even though there are people who were in the area, they were not people who were writing down the history. They weren't looking to make a name for themselves, and so we have very little history written down about that time. The area in which they operated was so vast and their number was so small that all combined efforts made little impact. After years of exploitation, the locale remained in a remarkably virgin state. So we had so much natural resources that it didn't even matter that we had so many people coming here to hunt and to take products from our area. It was like still looked like it had never been touched. So the European interest in the Ouachita region, northeast Louisiana and southern Arkansas, seemingly came in three distinct waves. The first was the Frenchmen coming to hunt and trap and trading on the river from the time of the Mississippi Valley's initial colonization all the way up to the Natchez Indian Massacre at Fort Rosalie in 1729, which we touched on that in the previous video. The Indian atrocity apparently frightened away would-be developers of the area. The second group was primarily settlers meandering northward from the Pointe Coupee post, and they came in the 1740s and the 1750s. Many of them left their dits, or that would be their aliases, as the names of the bayous and the prairies. So some of those would be Brenda d'Amour and Châtellerault, and those were left in the 1750s. And then they were left before they departed for the southern post about the time of the Spanish takeover in the late 1760s. The third wave consisted of descendants of the second wave. So the people that came through, their children and grandchildren came through. Most were the true Louisiana Creoles, and they had been born in the area of Pointe Coupee or the Opelousas Post. Names such as Cavette, Duval, Olivo, and those are, multiple spellings of that. It would be spelled on early Ouachita legal records. They would be spelled Olivo or Olivos, whereas currently most people whose name's Olivo spell it Oliveaux. So trappers came down from Canada via the Arkansas Post. And then in addition, there were a few traders who came directly from France. So Louis and Guillaume, which is like French for William. I probably butchered that. Y'all just run with it. Guillaume Epinet of Saint-Onge, which he was over the department of the Charité Maritime. They appeared on the Ouachita River by 1772. Although the Spanish saw the necessity of driving many would-be French colonials, mostly Louisiana Creoles, from the valley in 1770, the few eager entrepreneurs of the next decade were allowed to operate on the river without much harassment. So they just left these French colonials to continue living in the Monroe area. Creoles from the valley in 1770, the few eager entrepreneurs of the next decade were allowed to operate on the river without harassment. So the Ouachita Valley encompassed the land bordering the river of the same name, Ouachita River, extending from the area of Hot Springs in northern Arkansas southward towards the Mississippi River in Louisiana. The vast area was ignored with the exception of an occasional colonization scheme until the administration of Don Bernardo, the Comte de Galvez, in 1782. His interest no doubt evolved from events that had their origins between the war between Spain and England in the years between 1779 and 1782. During the war fought in conjunction with the American Revolution, the English Fort Panmure at Natchez fell to the Spanish as part of the English capitulation and peace terms of the famed Battle of Baton Rouge in late 1779. However, many loyal English subjects resented the Spanish occupation of Natchez, and in April 1781, Captain John Blumart, a local mill owner, supposedly on orders from the English commander of Pensacola, led a successful attack on the Spanish-controlled fort. And this event led to a very complicated chain of events through which the Spanish later regained control of the area. So at the time of the English reconquest of Fort Panmure in 1781, Alexander de Cloet, the commandant of the Spanish post of the Attakapas and Opelousas, received news of the English attack from a fellow commandant, Carlos de Grand Prix of Punta Cantarda, which would be Point Coupe. In his letter of May 3rd, 1781, Grand Prix stated that Blumart had gathered his force for the Natchez attack. So Blumart is the local mill owner. He had gathered his force for the Natchez attack on the west bank of the Mississippi and on the Ouachita. With news of the attack arriving in New Orleans, Pedro Piernes, acting governor during Galvez's absence, in conjunction with the Gulf Coast campaign, ordered that all post commanders to disarm all Englishmen and Americans and strangers found within their jurisdictions who might rise up against Spain in sympathy with the Natchez insurrection. So everybody loses their weapons if you are English, American, or a stranger. At the same instance, de Cloet sent a detachment under the command of Monsieur Latiolis towards the Ouachita to apprehend any rebels who might be there. On May 18, 1781, on Bayou D'Arbonne, a body of water northwest of the present city of Monroe, Louisiana, the Opelousas soldiers captured 2 English deserters. One was John Allen and the other was George Mitchell, and they had fled Natchez rather than reaffirm their allegiance to King George III of England. So these 2 men gave valuable information about the rebel insurgents at Natchez. So that's interesting. So Farmerville Union Parish plays a part in hiding these men going to hide out. So by July 1781, the Spanish defeated the English, and Esteban Roberto de la Morienda of the Opelousas militia raised the Spanish flag over the Natchez fort on July 23rd. When the English saw their efforts to hold the town fail, most fled. Some of the rebels crossed the Mississippi into the Ouachita area. The French inhabitants of that district believed that some type activity might be resumed by these renegades. So on November 2nd, 1781, Valentin Lassard of the Rapides Post wrote his father that he had received the frightening news about such a possibility from the son-in-law, the quote son-in-law, of Joseph Mateloit of Avoyelles Parish. When the latter went to the Tensas Bayou in the Ouachita Valley for his annual hunt, he discovered more than 200 English and savages were there in the Ouachita Valley. Lassard carried word to de Cloet in Opelousas and told them that unless they received help, he and the others like him would have to flee the area. So the possibility of English-American rebel activity in the Ouachita region no doubt played an important part in prompting Galvez to establish a strong buffer between the independent American states and the Spanish province. Thus, he decided to create the name Commandant and to create a new post on the Ouachita River. And he chooses Jean-Baptiste Filhiol, who is more commonly known as Don Juan Filhiol. Because remember, he's French, but he is working for the Spanish, and so he gets a new nickname. He gets a Spanish name. A French captain who is in the Opelousas militia within de Cloet's command, and he wants him to be the commandant. Later, the governor wrote that he saw his appointee as a man with integrity, fortitude, and concern with the safety of the colony. Well, that's exactly what you need to run a new colony that's going to possibly shape the change of Louisiana. So, on January 26, 1782, de Cloet informing Pyrenees that Filhiol was en route to New Orleans, he wrote, "I believe he attaches himself to the intentions of Sem de Galvez." Cloet expressed his regrets at losing the services of a man who had acted as a surveyor and as a scribesman within his district. So, Don Juan Filhiol has a whole background. So we're going to go into that background and we're going to piece together some parts of this history. So let's start with his beginning stages as he was growing up. The Calvinist revival in Emiet, France, in 1753 through 1754, it brought repression from the established church. So, from the Catholic Church. Thus, the Protestant families endured harassment so much so that many secretly sent their sons into the Allemands or the Germanic states for safety. So if you were Protestant living in Catholic France, then a lot of them were sending their sons to Germany, to what we would call Germany now. Since Jean Filhiol admitted having spent 5 years in the Allemands while he was young, he must have been part of that Calvinist group. However, after his stay in the Germanic states, he left Europe for Santo Domingo. So 3 legends survive about Filhiol's early life. The first concerns his medical training, the second his military career, and the third his knowledge of land surveying. Some documentable facts substantiate the traditions. So let's look at these legends and then see if it holds true. So while the Ouachita Commandant Filhiol referred to a pharmacy that he kept in his home for the colonists' benefit, it indicated that he had some medical expertise. So while he lived in Emiet, his family was closely associated with Monsieur Delbert, who is a barber and a master surgeon. Now, don't let that mess you up. It was very common for barbers to also participate in the medical profession. So that was a very common thing, whereas now you would not find that to be as very common. Elie Reynaud was a practitioner, Sicari Fournier was a master surgeon, and Gabriel Argentol, who was a surgeon, which would have allowed the young Jean to come and studied with any of them. The only proof of a military background comes from the letter in January 26, 1782, in which Alexander de Cloet referred to Filhiol as an old militia officer from Santo Domingo. And then where he learned to survey land will never be known. Supposedly, well, not supposedly, he actually did do survey work in Opelousas in 1781, and then he also did it in the Ouachita on a later date. So it suggests that he may have been an engineer during his military career in Santo Domingo. So after a 15-year stay in the French islands of Santo Domingo, he decided to return to France. In 1779, so this is, just so your brain's thinking about this, this is 3 years after we declared independence from England, he went to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which would have been a happening place for America during that time. So he went to take passage with the Count d'Estaing fleet. But when he arrived there, the fleet had already sailed. There is the possibility that he had gone to Santo Domingo seeking fame and fortune, as legend has persisted, but he also may have gone to Pennsylvania seeking the same elusive goal, especially looking for a command in the Patriot Army. So nevertheless, while he was there in Pennsylvania, he heard about French Louisiana and about more opportunities and decided to go there. Possibly while in Philadelphia, he may have met Jean-Joseph de la Baume, who is a native of Avignon, France, who had been to Louisiana in 1777, which would be 2 years prior, and who in his old age claimed that he had served with the Americans in their revolution. It must have been more than coincidental that the two formed such a close association at the Opelousas post in Louisiana when they were there together in 1780 and 1781. So that would have been 3 and 4 years later. After a trying voyage from Pennsylvania to New Orleans, Filhiol arrived in New Orleans in May of 1779, the same month that Carlos III, King of Spain, declared war on England. Traditional accounts relate that he volunteered for service as soon as Galvez announced hostilities in August 1779. He supposedly served under the governor's command in the Mississippi River campaign, and with such distinction, he was later commissioned a captain in the Opelousas Post militia. By July 1781, the Spanish had defeated the English. Oh, no, I'm telling you a different part of the story. So as he is commissioned as a captain in the Opelousas Post militia, Filhiol was with his new command by mid-year 1780, and he was well integrated into society by 1781. He witnessed legal transactions, he wrote many legal transactions, and he always signed his signature with the cryptographic of 2 lines and 3 dots, which denoted his military rank of captain. While he was serving in that position, he met Jean-Antoine Poiret, and through him, he met the young widow Francoise Poiret Berqueville. He met her at a county ball and commenced a relationship which culminated in marriage in March of 1782. So while he was a captain in the Opelousas militia, Filhiol was recommended by Galvez to be the commandant of the Ouachita post. Thus he went to New Orleans to obtain his instructions about February 1782. In anticipation of a commission as the post commander, he made an interim arrangements to become an Indian trader with the Caddo tribe in North Louisiana. He took goods from the firm of Mather and Strather and left the city in order to finish preparations for going to the area of his command. A short time before, at the Opelousas post, Filhiol renewed his association with Jean-Joseph de la Baume, which lasted for the next 20 years. De la Baume, as he always signed his name, he wouldn't sign it Baum as was custom. He signed the full name. He was the son of Count Joseph de la Baume and Marie Isabelle d'Alton of Avignon. And in his early manhood, he left home to seek his fortune in Montpelier. He possibly came to Louisiana from that city. With the end of the American Revolution, de la Baume and his wife, who is the aunt of Filhiol's wife, made preparations to join Filhiol for the resettlement on the Ouachita. Jean Poiret brother to Francois Poiret Filhiol, chose not to leave the area at that time, but he joined them later in 1785. Francois's parents and previous husband had died, which is who Filhiol marries, and she and her brothers left Illinois and returned to Louisiana to be near their Lecentric relatives, which had allowed her to meet and marry Filhiol. The family relationships between the Filhiols, the Poirets, and the Lecentrics made the founding of the Poste de Ouachita a family venture. Filhiol officially became the Ouachita commander in 1783, and for the next 17 years he worked to remodel the frontier to which he had been sent. There's a part from another section that I wanted to touch on, just on something that Russ Williams wrote. He said that 2 centuries ago, Spain recognized the value of the Ouachita Valley to her Louisiana province and total empire. It had great natural resources and an agricultural potential, but most importantly, it could serve as a strategically placed buffer zone between her prized Mexican territory and the ever-expanding young United States. Seemingly, the one ingredient necessary for establishing a successful post was a strong-willed man with a great love for the empire and a sincere dedication to duty. The Spanish authority found such a person in the Frenchman Juan Filhiol, who is now more commonly known as Don Juan Filhiol. Thus, when he was sent north from New Orleans in 1782 and officially commissioned in 1783 as the Ouachita Post civil and military commander, the slow, steady transformation from a primeval virgin frontier into an organized settlement had its beginning. For 20 years, the region had given homage to the Spanish Bourbon kings, Carlos III and Carlos IV, and it revered the red and gold flag of Spain. So, when Filhiol settled on the Ouachita River, he probably claimed the Ecourt of Fabry as his home for a few weeks, which was up in Camden. But by 1783, he had moved to, I skipped my thing. Let's see. Let me find my spot. We might have already touched on that. Oh, no. He had moved southward to the Prairie des Canots, which is now the site of Monroe, Louisiana. And he built the house that became his first permanent home in the valley. It must have been at that time that he officially petitioned for the land on both sides of the Ouachita River, and it was given to him by grant on June 23, 1785. However, in that interim, there's a strong possibility that he claimed the Canot Prairie and the Fabry Bluff as his domiciles. Just as he organized 2 military districts and militia units, he must have established these 2 habitations. It can be proven that he went to the Fabry Bluff twice yearly to conduct militia musters and there remained for several weeks. He and his wife must have had a house to stay in during those visits. It would not have been acceptable for the post commander to camp in the woods as did his militiamen. Nevertheless, the city of Monroe had its origins at the onset of Filhiol's receiving his command commission in 1783, a date which marks the official beginning of the Ouachita Post. Over 60 years before, Cantillon had commenced a French settlement in the same neighborhood that Filhiol started his work. If that effort would have been successful, Monroe would have now been able to claim a heritage almost as old as its sister city, Natchitoches, which they were not able to hold on to that land for very long, and so Filhiol is the one who is successful in doing that. I'm going to go ahead and stop this video at this point, and then we'll start another one and tell some more interesting details about Don Juan Filhiol. So I hope to see you in the next video, and I hope this has been interesting to you and that you are learning lots about Monroe's history, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.